Really warm welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this event of our book club series, We Should All Be Feminist. My name's Rebecca and I'll be one of the hosts today. I'm currently doing a master's in gender studies, but I also work as a consultant at Civil Society Consultancy, which is a not-for-profit consultancy. So these events are being delivered with ENORB, which is, just for any of those new attendees, a network aimed at strengthening mutual understanding and collaboration between religious and non-religious groups. Just had to mute someone there. So for any new attendees, it's a network aimed at strengthening mutual understanding and collaboration between religious and non-religious groups. This project is also being funded by the European Network Against Racism, Empowerment and Resilient Funds. So just a little bit of background for the idea behind this project. We invite different feminist authors and scholars to discuss their work. This is not only to gain an understanding of critical gender issues that are pervading Europe and beyond, but also share this with wider audiences as well. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our second host, Martina, who's a PhD student at Political Sciences at SOAS University and a consultant for ENORB. And she is going to introduce our brilliant speaker today.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'd say that Rebecca is an amazing, and has been an amazing colleague on this project. And now I have the absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Kristina Millona, who's a scholar from Albania working on topics around sexualities, communism, and archives. And she also has a master's degree in Transnational Queer Feminist Politics at SOAS University of London. And Kristina is currently writing on the nexus between men, mobility, and border violence by focusing on the securitization of Albanian asylum seekers in the UK. So just a little bit of the structure of the event today. I don't want to be boring, but Kristina is going to give us a presentation on our topic, which will lead into a discussion with Rebecca and I. Because we'd really like to ask some burning questions to Kristina. We can't wait to ask her. And then we'd love to open the floor to everyone that wants to ask any question to Kristina. So, and please keep in mind that as we're speaking, you can either write in the chat some questions, or you can put your hand up afterwards with the hand icon. You shouldn't find it, so we don't miss any questions along the way. And throughout the conversation, we will turn all non-speakers' microphones off, so there are no interruptions, background noise. And finally, just for your knowledge, we are recording the event, so you're informed about this. If you don't want to show your face, you can no showing your face, and also if you have to leave early, you can find this event on our YouTube page. I will put the link in the chat, so if you miss any part of the event, you can watch it afterwards. So I've talked enough, and I'll leave the floor with great pleasure to Kristina.
Hi, everyone. Firstly, warm welcome to everyone who tuned in for the discussion of today. And many thanks to both of you, Martina and Rebecca, for putting up this event and for the lovely presentation as well. I will firstly start sharing my screen so I can share the presentation with all of you. I believe now you should be able to see it. Okay, great. Thanks for the heads up. So again, firstly, let me thank ENORB for providing us with a space and platform to engage critically and thoroughly on the topic why particularly Albanians became the latest scapegoats in the British immigration policies. Indeed, the xenophobic language and punitive measures directed today towards the Albanian community in the UK has drawn a lot of attention, but it's important not to detach this rhetoric from the systemic exclusion and structural inequalities that Albanians have faced and encountered for years within the asylum system in the UK, here particularly referring to asylum-seeking children. But for this, I'm going to be talking more in depth throughout the presentation. So actually, the racism towards Albanians has a long history in Europe, and the Albanophobia in the British media today is all too reminiscent of the targeting of Albanians in Italy and Greece over 30 years ago, where Albanians have been depicted as agents of violence and crime, and pretty much resonating with what has been circulating in the British media. Here I've illustrated two articles that one of them has been like a reactionary article towards the British media narratives on Albanians, and the other one has like a more broader historical perspective on the immigration of Albanians in Greece. So basically, this rhetoric back then was attached to the exodus of thousands of Albanians leaving the country after the collapse of communist dictatorship in 1991. And for this, I'm going to explain more in the next slide. And basically, these narratives of the alleged involvement of Albanians in criminal activities was emphasized by local authorities and mainstream media. While discrimination has lessened to nowadays, there's still this tendency that, for instance, every murder, every theft is blamed firstly on Albanians, for instance, in the Greek media. Moving on to the next slide to provide you some historical perspective on the Albanian migration order. So maybe some of you might be familiar with the communist past. So Albania was hermetically closed off under Enver Hoxha's communist dictatorship. And this was a political regime where basically Albanians were banned from traveling and settling outside the country. So this isolationist past, resembling nowadays North Korea political system, and coupled with the socioeconomic tensions that followed after the overthrow of the communist regime. Sorry. These tensions caused basically by the fall of the regime in 1991 explain the specificity of Albanian immigration of that time. During the 90s, episodes of exodus left a lasting mark on society. The first episode took place between 1990 and 1993, following the collapse of the communist regime, with most migration destined for Italy and Greece. Between March and June 1991, more than 50,000 people left Albania for Italy. And then we have another massive wave of immigration that was recorded in the years after 1997, when financial pyramid schemes, which were like schemes where a lot of Albanians had to put their life savings, basically, they went bankrupt. And the bankruptcy of these schemes brought a total collapse of economy, breakdown of police structures. So basically, all in all, a nationwide chaos resulting to a deadly conflict that killed around 1,500 people. And this caused a massive wave of immigration. Throughout the 1997, there is a record of over 60,000 Albanians who moved to Italy. So just to give you some figures about the exodus. They were fleeing from the dangerous situation that characterized Albania during that period. And of course, so this massive migratory flows triggered the intervention of European states. For instance, in this period, we have the establishment of UN peacekeeping missions, which mostly delivered humanitarian aid to Albanians, but also were interested in patrolling borders, and did not really engage in cracking down and dismantling criminal gangs, which had taken over the control in those years. And in 2001, almost half of 1 million of Albanians left the country to settle in Greece, and 270,000 left towards Italy. Here I've provided like a timeline of different interventions towards Albanian migratory flows from the side of European states. For instance, in April 2005, Albania became the first Balkan country to sign a community readmission agreement with the EU. So basically with all member states of the European Union, imposing an obligation to accept the return of Albanian nationals in basically irregular situation on EU territory, as they define it. And this rhetoric kind of resonates with nowadays British government measures towards Albanian immigrants, and pretty much like mirrors the EU Frontex border regime that has been for years disproportionately over-policing, detaining and deporting back Albanians through safe country readmission agreement. So since 2005, this agreement with like the safe third country agreement with Albania have resulted in Albania being the country to which EU states carry out the highest number of deportation. Also, the infographics here build up on the data compiled and covering the period from 2006 to 2021. As you can see from the figures, there is an exponential increase in deportations from 2015 up to 2019. And basically how this takes form is deportations in the form of European charter flights implemented under the auspices of the European agency Frontex. Some interesting figures actually come from France. So since 2017, the French authorities, with the support of Frontex, have been organizing weekly deportation flights of Albanian nationals from France. So in 2021 alone, around 45% of deportations outside the EU were actually with Albania as destination, with basically Albanian nationals subjected to more detentions and deportation than any other nationality. And maybe here we can have like a moment of reflection on how this over-policing and targeting of Albanians by Frontex deportation flights might also constitute a factor in the complex interactions of reasons behind the surge in the number of Albanian entries from France to the UK during 2022. Moving on to the next slide. So the discourse of the British government towards the Albanian community has been inflammatory since the Home Office Secretary Suella Braverman addressed the Parliament last November by raising the alarm about, quote unquote, an invasion of the southern coast by illegal boats, and by particularly emphasizing the surge in the numbers of Albanian arrivals. So here in this slide, I've shown some excerpts from the speeches of different political actors focusing on the Albanian arrivals in the English Channel. For instance, here is Braverman saying, many of them, by referring to Albanians, are abusing our modern slavery laws. People coming here illegally from safe countries are not welcomed and should not expect to stay. Also, she later argued in her speech that individuals coming from a country deemed safe by the UK, as is the case with Albania, should be stripped of their right to claim asylum. And in another video, there is Nigel Farage, who is a former Brexit party leader. And in a lot of his public speeches and appearances, actually, he has been using this argument, like basically claiming that there is a flood of Albanian men storming the UK, and that the majority of these men are prone to organized crime. And on the right side, there is an excerpt of another video with the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announcing a new 5-point strategy for dealing with illegal immigration, including plans to fast-track the return of Albanian asylum seekers, and also making correlation with basically arguing that these fast-track deportation and assessment of asylum claims from Albanians will also clear the initial backlog of almost 150,000 asylum cases back then, because I think now the record has changed a bit, has increased. So, as many scholars in migration scholarship have analyzed, anti-immigration rhetoric by media and other right-wing demagogues enforce pathological and toxic forms of masculinity at borders. So these alarmist political discourses and the whole anti-Albanian bashing has relied on media frenzy, which have portrayed all Albanian migrant men as this homogeneous group, stamped out with characteristics such as adult, dangerous, criminal, manipulators of modern slavery system, and have completely ignored the diverse lived experiences of Albanian asylum seekers. Also, the rates of Albanian men identified as potential survivors of human trafficking have been ignored from the media rhetoric. And this has basically resulted in discourses that present Albanian migrants as a dangerous masculine force invading the country. Here, I basically showcase some of the main theories that I've used while doing discourse analysis about the media narratives. So, in general, these securitizing discourses that forge racial anxieties and border panics in the public are quite central and crucial for anti-immigration politics. These narratives basically treat and frame migrants as economic, demographic, security threats, and as the literature on securitization of immigration illustrates, political discourses that conflate security with immigration can potentiate securitizing actions, and these actions basically translate into more restrictive immigration policies. For instance, to exemplify, in one of her political speeches, Braverman stated that many of the immigrants who arrived in the UK by boats last year were facilitated by criminal gangs, some of them actual members of the criminal gangs, as Braverman said. So this rhetoric used by the Home Secretary interlinks migrants and criminal networks, which enforces the rhetoric of migrants as a security threat for the nation, and therefore legitimizes the need for further militarization, immigration enforcement, and securitization of borders. To deploy the theory on the discourses around Albanians. So here I zone in a bit more on the escalating language towards Albanians. So here I show some snapshots from a video where Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick is filmed during a visit to one immigration removal center where he's addressing the nation and declaring basically an open season on Albanians because the public lynching was indeed very dehumanizing. So during one part he's saying, quote unquote, "We are working round the clock to find the Albanians, to detain them and take them back to Tirana." And basically all this rhetoric and similar videos and speeches from other Tories leadership have been building on this general vilification of Albanian migrants, and at the same time feeding the collective public fears against the criminal Albanians, and basically transforming the fast-track deportation of illegal Albanians as the topic of the day. Here, there are more examples, more posts published by Home Office. And yeah, basically, they just use the same rhetoric of taking pride on detaining undocumented Albanian workers, visa overstayers, and flexing on the high numbers of Albanians getting deported to their home country. I think that here in this slide, I show one of the most, like the harshest legislative attacks towards Albanian community, because basically this securitizing discourses around Albanians, as the securitization of immigration theory stipulates, these discourses were matched by restrictive immigration policies. And I think that around December last year, there was a commission review of the country policy information note on human trafficking in Albania. So for maybe for individuals that aren't very familiar with the asylum system, this document, like the CPIN, is of great importance actually, because it serves as a guidance for those assessing asylum claims within Home Office. And the new guidance on trafficking in Albania, published by the government, unlike its predecessor, it asserted that asylum claims by trafficked men and boys from Albania are likely to be certified as clearly unfounded. So in simple terms, this implies that the Albanian male claimants do not have a well-founded fear of persecution. And according to this new modified version, it appears that they are neither at risk of harm nor of a potential re-trafficking, presumably because of the available and sufficient protection at their disposal in Albania from the local authorities there. So this new guidance might impact negatively in the granting of refugee protection for Albanian male claimants who fear re-trafficking and persecution in their home country. This certification is indeed a draconian measure that deprives basically the asylum seekers from the right to appeal. Basically leaves only judicial review as the only option. So for instance, if an Albanian male claims gets refused by Home Office in the first application, then the only option is to do the judicial review, but other than that, the right to appeal is not available anymore. And according to different migrant legal experts that actually have experience representing legally Albanian community, they have criticized this new CPIN, and they have argued that this has brought critical consequences for Albanian asylum seekers, especially given the fact that in the last 6 years, approximately half of Albanian applications for asylums were granted with protection only after following a subsequent appeal, so only after appealing the decision. And what is even more interesting is that within the document, because in this document they show both sides, like the British government and the Albanian government, like they show what are the services at the disposal in regard to to survivors of human trafficking. And as evidence in the CPIN, the support provided to male survivors of trafficking is actually very limited in Albania. There are no shelters for adult male victims. And there is, according to the sources of this document, there is an NGO called Different and Equal, providing actually reintegration services for survivors of human trafficking, and is the only non-governmental organization which provides support for male victims of trafficking, including rented apartments. So that is all in regards to this part. Another interesting fact that I found throughout my research was in relation to the systemic marginalization towards Albanian asylum-seeking children. So according to Migrant and Refugee Children's Legal Unit, which is a London-based specialist legal and policy hub, which has extensive experience in legally representing Albanian asylum-seeking children, they have provided some statistics that actually Albanian children face longer waiting time in receiving recognition of the validity of their need for protection. And overall, from 2014 until 2022, the average time to reach a conclusive grounds decision from the date of referral is 633 days for Albanian children, compared to 335 days for children of other nationalities. Also, a Spersa program, which is one of the few charities in London that assists and works for the integration of the Albanian-speaking community of refugees and migrants. They have a really good project done jointly with the organization, with Miklu. I think Breaking the Chain is the name of the project, and basically there they have collected personal narratives of Albanian asylum-seeking children and all these structural inequalities that they face and how this takes a toll on their mental health. So here, moving on to other structural inequalities, here I present figures on deportation charter flights from the UK, which are based on data retrieved from Corporate Watch, which is an independent research group that investigates mega companies and corporations profiting from prisons and deportation flights. So as you can see, Albanians are disproportionately targeted compared with other nationalities. And I tried to find some data like what is the profile of the individuals getting deported, but it's a bit hard because there aren't much disaggregated data that shows basically the profiles of who's getting deported, but I guess it includes figures of how they call it and put it, foreign criminal and immigration offenders, like visa overstayer, undocumented migrants. And for sure, due to the whole Albanophobia narrative, the number of Albanians deported has increased exponentially. So especially after they announced, I believe, Operation Bridora at the beginning of this year, which was an action that has ordered asylum units to process only Albanian asylum cases and fast-track the deportation of the failed asylum seekers and others. So yeah, the figures probably are much higher. So here, before I comment on this site, I would actually like to say that it's really important, of course, to show solidarity and to acknowledge those facing historical forms of oppression, such as communities of refugees escaping from militarized occupations and those affected by colonial causes of displacement. And differently from refugees fleeing from persecution and conflicts in Africa, of course, Albanians do not have to undertake journey like the deadly route of the Mediterranean Sea. But nonetheless, I think it is really the time to maybe start critically engaging and identifying the systemic nature of racism towards Albanians, because we have seen, as I also presented at the beginning of this PowerPoint presentation, that we have seen how ideological lenses of war on drugs that have since the 90s discursively framed Albanian immigrants as criminals in different immigration receiving countries in Western Europe, and how this ideology of war on drugs has legitimized the expansion of immigration enforcement towards Albanians by making them the most targeted nationality by EU deportation machine. So basically, I could not end this presentation without touching upon the epistemological silence towards Albanians in the British political left. And I believe this results from a combination of identity markers, historic or the history of Albania, like basically always seen as largely passing as white and not sharing the story of British colonialism. And also basically to understand and to shed light on the systemic racism towards Albanians, not only in the UK, but more broadly in other settings as well. And this remains largely overlooked and ignored. So I don't think I could find a better way to end this talk other than with a citation from one of my favorite scholars, Al-Shavalia, who says, "Anti-oppression analysis becomes rigid in its categorization when the question becomes who is more oppressed, rather than engaging in a dialogue of how oppression, which is relational and contextual, is specifically manifesting and impacting the orientation of our movements." So This was all from my side. I also have provided here for the audience a bibliography of some of the recent critical articles written on the topic, but not only, there are also some studies of Albanian scholars on Albanian migration. So yeah, maybe we're going to share it later in the end. Thank you for your attention, and yeah, solidarity with all refugees and migrants despite skin color and origin. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kristina. I feel like you covered, honestly, so much then, which would have taken me hours and hours to read through and sift through all the untruths, let's say it, in that way. All right, so me and Martina are just going to ask a couple of questions now, just to kick things off, and then we'd love to, of course, open up the floor to everybody else. So you touched on this, of course, and I know it's kind of a complex question, but one I assume there's lots of different intersecting factors, but why, in your opinion, have Albanian migrants just been so singled out by far-right discourses and politicians in the British media?
Sure. Well, based on the discourse analysis and, you know, like keeping track of all the super vitriolic rhetoric on Albanians, I think that there is like a combination of different factors that have basically justified this rhetoric. And I think the easiest answer that comes to my mind is probably because it's a community that in Britain constitutes an easy scapegoat, in the sense that passing largely as white, like as white passes, if whomever from political actors engages in such rhetoric against Albanians won't draw much criticism on racism if they if they follow such rhetoric, because of the specific identity markers that characterize Albanian community. So this is one of the arguments that I would bring, but also I think that we shouldn't frame the let's say British media narrative as something that has started only after Suella raised the alarm, because I think that this way we reproduce this historical amnesia that actually we see that there have been harmful and stereotypical narratives towards the Albanian community long before that in British media. Like there have always been this depiction of, you know, Albanian gangs bringing criminality, expanding the drug cartels. So, you know, in the public imagery in Britain, Albanians have been framed like that long ago. And I would link this again with, you know, war on drugs, so these moral panics around Albanians. But definitely, yeah, this has been exacerbated as a rhetoric from affiliated media to the political leadership of Tories. And maybe another reason I would say is also this, you know, narrative foregrounded on the bogus claims of Albanians that derives on this idea that, oh, Albania is not going, it's not undergoing any conflict, it's not a war-torn country, actually it's a country that it's quite famous now for its tourism, and suddenly, you know, you had so many advertisements exposing Albania as, you know, the new gem of Europe. So I think there has been like a combination and a concerted actions from different actors that have produced this, you know, narrative of, okay, Albania is a country that it's safe. So basically to build into this narrative. But on the other hand, you know, the narrative on reporting about the human trafficking rate there in Albania and other problems that exist there, and basically the lived experiences of asylum seekers that need and are actually being granted with refugee protection from the British authorities is something that remains quite marginal, especially in the mainstream media.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your presentation, Kristina. I hadn't the chance to tell you before, but thank you. There's so much to unpack here, and I'm grateful that we can do that right now with you. And regarding this point you were addressing in the answer to Rebecca, I know that it's quite a complex question, but why do you think that Albania is deemed a safe country comparatively to others? Is there any reason you think about?
Yeah, many reasons. Like it's political game at the end, because I mean, of course, if we localize such rhetoric within the talk about refugees and who is deemed to be a refugee and who is not, of course that there is always this tendency to compare Albania to other nationalities coming from Afghanistan, from countries that actually face war and conflict, but there is never this structure analysis on Albanians. Like, for instance, all these presentations that I did, like, to also understand the dynamic of Albanian migration, it's not discussed enough. I mean, I don't expect this in the Tories narrative, of course, but at least in the British left, I would have really like to have such discussion, because I think that still we don't understand how systematic this has been. And as I also showed in the presentation, look like the structure inequalities that Albanian children, asylum seekers have faced. And now maybe we can also give explanation to why last year there were those staggeringly high rate of Albanian asylum seeker children that went missing. Of course, because if they have such disproportionately long waiting times, this is something that will attract smuggling networks and gangs to exploit, basically, and to convince the children that they need to leave the asylum system. So yeah, I think that there is also this tendency and combination of different narratives and discourses by different actors to not focus on what's happening in Albania, like how there is pervasive corruption, how the legal structures are very weak. There are many factors that actually substantiate the risk factors that some asylum seekers are facing, and they should be granted with refugee protection.
I remember when I was kind of researching on this and just really actually but analysing media reports, I was just so struck by, I don't know if it's the right word, but not lack of sympathy, but there's so many contradictory statements. It's almost trying to sift through what's true and what's right. I'm thinking, from your opinion, do you think this is, on purpose, or are we generally just, being ignorant about what the situation is going on here?
I mean, the lived experiences of those that come and move, of course, are quite complex. And we can't really generalize. But I've also noticed, and your observation resonates also with mine. I was also a bit like, where is this heading to, like, it's so chaotic indeed. And yeah, I remember so many weird headlines, like, talking about how some of these Albanians are, foreign national offenders, and it's like super mixed. And I think it's very deliberate to divert the attention from the root cause of all the problems, and also by placing the blame on Albanians, as if are the Albanians the one that put more burdensome on the backlog of the asylum system. I think also this has been quite prevalent, especially at the beginning. Like, there were many political actors that were saying, oh, we want to show solidarity to all these immigrants coming through these routes in our country. But, there are the Albanians that there are so many now in numbers arriving to our country, and we need to deal with them and to assess their claims.
Thank you. I'd just like to stay in this discourse a little bit and talking about conversations that build up towards Albania and towards migrants. I'm from Italy, so I know a little bit about that, also about like Albanians and the conversation, the narratives about Albanian migrants. I was kind of not surprised, I'd say, but it was interesting to notice this fact that it's going on again and again, even though the country is changing. I mean, they're kind of I mean, Albanian people, they're passing as white, so we're not talking about racism while we're talking about this huge and negative conversation narratives towards Albanian migrants, but still they're not aware that this is racism, because like there is this passing that as white, so we cannot talk about racism. I mean, we cannot talk with the people that are building up those kind of narratives. And so my question, I mean, it's not kind of a question, but I'd like to untangle this fact. I mean, I think, and also from your presentation, I feel that you're kind of the same, you agree with that, we want to address this kind of racism because it's a racism.
Exactly.
But this whiting pass is also difficult to address as racism. So do you think, I mean, is there anything else we can do something and also linked to this, it's also really difficult to talk about colonization consequently.
Exactly.
Because talking about colonization is always difficult. People feel attacked and you cannot go ahead with the conversation. And on the other hand, not recognizing this approach as racism, it's also difficult to talk about colonialism. Do you, I mean, I know it's not a question actually, really, but do you have anything in mind about that?
Yeah, actually, firstly, thank you for sharing your view on that. I mean, I have my own issue with this, very categorical understanding of racism, as it is, inherently linked to the color, because yes, Harsha Valia theorizes like racism and, marginalization and building on structural inequalities can also derive in very specific contexts, like as I exemplified with the case of Albanians, like racism has been there towards them, especially Albanian children that seek asylum. But we don't talk because, sometimes I feel, this is my personal view, in the British left, there is this very rigid categorization between who is colonized and who is not. And I think this is also the problem with, I guess, Albania, that you kind of exempt the historical oppressions that Albanians might have faced just because, doesn't fall into this category of former British colony. Because we know that, the whole discourse of criticizing racism in Britain is also very much linked to, criticizing the rhetoric towards migratory flow from post-colonial migratory flows, basically. So yeah, I would again get back to what Harsha says and understand and maybe reconceptualize the anti-oppression analysis and framework that we use when we talk about these issues. So yeah, that would be my reaction towards what you said. Amazing.
And I think one of our last-ish questions just from us, I wanted to bring it to your article, which kind of inspired this whole conversation and this webinar today. And I really urge everyone to read it. I have put it in the chat. But there's one line which really struck out to me, which was the demonization of Albanians as scammers of modern slavery is racist and wrong. And I was just wondering if you can go into more depth of how this scammers of modern slavery has just become so pertinent and so strong and so powerful as well. To me, it just seems absurd, to a certain extent. But what are your views on that?
Yeah, again, as I mentioned in the presentation, there has been this very sensationalist and basically essentializing on 10,000 Albanians as this, homogeneous group that suddenly it's this security threat. And I think that this kind of goes hand in hand also with the rhetoric from War on Drugs that the SOAS, depicted and discursively framed Albanians as criminals. And this, of course, has been used in rhetoric of not only Farage, but other, political figures, mostly like these right-wing demagogues that, talk about Albanian masculinities in this, always, presenting this pathological form. And, this has been quite prevalent, I guess, in, not only the discourse of Tories, but also in media narratives as well.
Thank you. About masculinity, I was kind of interested in this topic as we started the project for feminists, and then we had a lot of other issues going into. But do you think that why are they using masculinity to have a picture of an immigrant as something dangerous, something bad? Because the description of the masculinity of Albanian migrants, and also like in general toward migrants, is quite specific. I mean, they're kind of dangerous. They're stealing the so-called our women. That's kind of funny, because it's like a sort of what is happening in Europe, not talking about migration, but we have a problem about this kind of a masculinity. And the description of masculinity is used towards foreign people, migrants, and it seems kind of so strong. I mean, people really believe that like all the migrants are belonging to that kind of a masculinity. So I was wondering, why are they using masculinity as a tool to give a description of migrants, in your opinion? I mean, and what do you think it's so strong as a narrative?
Well, this can be seen from different angles, but I would untangle it by saying that, of course, gender and border regime intersect a lot, especially in the interest of immigration receiving countries in the West, always, building these oppositional binaristic categories of, the civilized West and all these immigration flows that come. We should question if they are, the right, legitimate refugees, especially the Albanian males or other, must say masculinities. Are they, the right one to access our social welfare or to enter our country, their country? So I think this also plays a bit on this rhetoric of the feminization of land, as we also saw it in all these securitizing discourses that, okay, now we have to do something about Albanians to stop them, all this, whole rhetoric of the masculinization of immigration flows as well, that, as always created this category of 10,000 Albanians. This is a risk now, this is a national threat. So I guess, like different system of oppression intersect and are quite interwoven in producing like all this idea of the national threat of these sexualities. And I think maybe to also draw a parallel with other ideologies like war on terror, for instance, that has been instrumentalized to, do racial profiling towards Arab passing such Muslim men. Like we know like how disproportionately they are affected from a prison industrial complex, and also their access to asylum system as well. I think this plays a bit with this narrative of racialized criminality or racialized sexuality, that, these identities are depicted as the sexual repressive Arab, and the whole rhetoric that goes after that. And we actually saw it last year, like the reports that I think Suela Braver, maybe some other political figures mentioned about the looming risk of Pakistani grooming gangs, like, you know, the whole rhetoric of this racialization of sexual crimes, because this also builds and feeds these moral panics about, you know, these men that are entering our country and sorry, trigger warning, like raping our white girls. This is also very like interesting binaristic categorization that they put in their narratives and rhetoric. Sorry, maybe I went into different directions, but I feel like, you know, it's so prevalent in different discourses that racialize, different communities.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristina.
Really, thank you so much. We have some questions, I think, so I'd like to open the floor right now. What do you think?
Enough questions from us.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we have a question in the chat from Piero. That's saying brilliant presentation. Thank you for the great insight into the racialization of Albanian migrants by the right in the UK. The question is, what about the Labour position? Is it not the same as the left in Greece, France, and Germany, where the position is nearly identical to that of the right? Where do you think these deeply rooted tropes towards Albanians in Europe stemmed from? What's so different about Albanians, say, from Serbs or other Eastern Europeans? Thank you again.
Should we group some questions, or like should we also?
So should we start with the first one? So what about the Labour position?
Yeah, sure. True that, like, also the Labour position hasn't been quite supportive. As far as I managed to follow the rhetoric from their side, I would have expected more as a party that is foregrounded and aligns with the left politics. But yeah, they've also tried to, you know, not be very direct in supporting Tories, but at the same time, you can tell that they are trying to avoid this discussion on immigration, because they feel like this is like the hot potato in British politics, and also the general elections are approaching. So on this point, Peter, I would say that I was quite positively impressed by other parties, like the Green Party, that has been bold enough to condemn the racializations of Albanians and of other communities as well. And it's indeed sad, like the current position that the Labour Party has towards migration policies. But let's see what will happen in the general elections next year. Maybe I read the other questions as well. Regarding the deeply rooted racist tropes towards Albanians in Europe, I need to research more on that. But as I said, like I see this, you know, trope of discursively framing Albanians as criminals, getting repeated in different settings, different contexts. So I believe it kind of stems, and all these experiences and all these projects of racialization towards Albanians are kind of bound up by war on drugs, I would say. And as for the last point regarding Albanians from Serbs or other Eastern Europeans, I think that in Serb it's a different setting, because it's like there was a genocide project waged against Albanians. So I think, yeah, that's another specific form of racialization, and, you know, like much harsher form actually. But yeah, I've also noticed that especially in the current discourse towards Albanians in the UK, there are indeed a lot of Slavic accounts that, you know, they are like telling to British people that we were the first to warn you about Albanians. So they're also kind of, you know, contributing to this collective panic about the danger of allowing Albanians to enter the countries.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kristina. And we do have a hand up. Sorry for keeping you waiting for a bit. Spokuri, do you want to put your mic on?
Oh, do you hear me? Because I'm having a very bad connection.
We can hear you perfectly, by the way. So
Okay, great.
Perfectly well.
Great. Okay, first of all, thank you, Kristina, for this very great presentation, insightful, I might say. And thank you, Martina, for inviting me in such a wonderful event. And I beg you pardon if I will repeat something you might have said during the presentation, but as I said, I'm having a very bad connection, and sometimes I lost you when you were speaking. Well, I will make a deduction from my personal experience. So as a researcher, I know that I might base my question on empirical studies and stuff, but it seems to me like lately the UK press have been more, so the narrative of UK press have been more negative towards Albanians. And in the other hand, lately there have been a lot of young men, Albanian young men that have migrated in towards UK that are dealing with drugs, and that I base that on my personal experience because a lot of people I know are talking regarding that for relatives or friends who have migrated in UK and are dealing with drugs. Do you see a correlation between those two things? So the negative narrative of UK press and this kind of migration towards UK.
So if I understood it well, you're saying that basically all these narratives against Albanians stem because there are Albanians engaged in drug economy.
Yeah, lately, I mean, I'm making a deduction based on my personal experience, not that I know people who have migrated there, but people that I know are telling, let's say, I'm hearing a lot of stories from different people I know that a lot of young Albanians have migrated to UK and are dealing with drugs. Like I'm making a bit of devil's advocate, but I want to understand if there is a correlation between those two things. So media narratives and the migration from Albania during the recent years.
Well, I think the whole narrative about drug economy, as I said, like I have my own specific attitude towards that. Like I think that at the end, this is a labor outsourced, a precarious type of labor outsourced on poor migrants that are in such position. Of course, there might be some instances, but that doesn't mean that we need to generalize that. Absolutely, this doesn't give us a reason to justify a rhetoric that basically has reached to such level that now even asylum seekers from Albania, and believe me, there are a lot of them that risk their lives if they get back to Albania. We have cases of a guy that was deported back to Albania because he didn't win the case of asylum and he was murdered within 2 days. So my answer to your question would be, maybe we step a bit back from these different conspiracies that they build, as if Albanians are the only, individuals that do this. There is a demand for drugs, and we should also see like the power disbalances where this recruitment is happening, because there are also a lot of Albanians that are forced to do this. There is a high rate, statistically speaking, actually, there is a high rate of Albanians that are survivors or victims of forced labor, of modern slavery. So I guess that would be my answer to that. I honestly don't believe in this racialization of drugs.
As I said, this is a deduction that I've made from my personal experience. So from stories I've heard during the recent years when I was back in Albania. so it's not based in any study, or I don't know why, but or any other, let's say, scholar or stuff, but it's just based on my personal experience. So maybe,
Sure.
and do you believe that there is, let's say, which is the role of Albanian government in that?
In what,
In
like
the, I mean, in this in the whole
of
are you hearing me? Sorry,
yes. Should I answer to that? If you're done with your point, or should I maybe pass the floor to Ledi? Ledi also has extensive experience with the Albanian community. Go on, Ledi.
Hi, everyone. Let me lower my hand, first of all. So thank you very much, Kristina, for being here today and for sharing these point of views that are very, very important. And working with the community in the last 3 years, more than 3 years, with the Albanian community in UK, I realized how less information and how wrong information people have about Albanians in UK. And that's why days like this and these kind of organizations and organizing this kind of workshops and informative days about the Albanians and the background and why Albanians leave Albania, it's very important for people to know. At least they will have another point of view, because we don't pretend to change the mind of everyone, but having that alternative of information and evidences is very important. I just wanted to answer to Bukurie. I hope she can listen to us. At the Shpresa program, we have a project that is specifically working with unaccompanied asylum seekers 15 to 25 years old. And of course, the reasons why they left the countries are different. It might be blood feud, it might be forced labor, trafficking, and some of them, they have problems with the political system back in Albania, or their families have this problem, and many of them, they were groomed initially because they are living in suburbs, they were living in very poor conditions, in poverty, and their families were very vulnerable. At that time, for the trafficker, it's very easy to groom them and to traffic them to the UK. Of course, they offer them a lot of financial benefits. So they tell them that they don't have to pay for the journey, and the moment that they will be in UK, they will be paid very well. So they will be able to help their families getting out of the poverty and have a brighter future. And as soon as they come in UK, they found themselves in this traffic chain. They don't have rights to go and escape. They found themselves inside of this cannabis house, forcibly working for the traffickers, and the traffickers don't give them money and tell them, now you will work for us in order for your family to pay back the debt of your journey. The journey might be 20,000, 30,000 pounds sometimes. So it's all about this trafficking chain. And when people say that most of the Albanians are economic migrants, it's wrong. Because it starts like an economic migrant, but they end up trafficked in UK. So one of the things that this negative narrative is doing, and I'm very sorry about that because I'm working with young people as well, that they are 10 to 18, is changing our perception for ourselves. So a lot of young people and children that I'm working with, they started thinking, oh, I came in here, I left my country because I had the reason, but others, they are coming here because they are criminals. So this is internalizing this negative narrative like this is very damaging because of the young people feeling lost and they don't have the sense of identity anymore. And many of them, they are born in here. Some of them, they came here at a very early age, and they will be the leaders of the future of this country. We cannot deny this because they were born in here. They came in here as children. So why should we damage them at this very early age? So when we hear that Albania is a safe country, but all the Albanians are criminals, there is something that doesn't match that. How can Albania be a safe country, but at the same time all the Albanians are criminals? So there is something wrong in there. And of course, having our government approaching us like that because they have an interest to be in this safe countries list because they want to become EU members makes it even more difficult for our community members, because this is when they have a common interest with the UK government, and it makes it very, very easy for them to have this agreement now, because we know that between the Albanian government and the UK government, there is already an agreement in place for every Albanian who comes illegally to be returned back in Albania. And at Shpresa, we are working on this. We are working in supporting people for them to have a safe space to talk, at least to talk about that. And we are trying to empower people enough to share their stories, because only by sharing our stories, we can start talking about how this is affecting real people in real life, because no one is speaking about that. But these people, these criminals, they are real people who now they are struggling with the mental health. We have many cases of our young asylum seekers that they are suicidal. They try to kill themselves. They are under medication. They are really, really struggling. They don't find a way out of this because they are asked to report every two weeks with the Home Office. And we have had many cases of our community members that on the day that they are asked to report, they are detained, and they found themselves in front of the fact that they should be deported back, should be sent back in Albania. And they also have a ticket, a return ticket in their hands with no rights to appeal. So our community is scared. Our community is targeted now. And the last thing that I would like now to happen between us is for us to internalize this narrative. It's not true. It's not true. All the countries have its own criminals. So let's go on, let's continue, let's build power. This is what we are doing in collaboration with Citizens UK and other organizations now, for our voice to be heard and for us to feel stronger. Because only if we can damage this illegal immigration bill, we can reach something. It's not the right attitude now to doubt ourselves. No, we have many and many successful stories of Albanian members, community members in here. And when I'm talking about successful stories, I'm not talking about Dua Lipa or Armando Boya. I'm talking about people who come in here and they find a job as a nurse, as a teacher, as a cleaner, as a builder. They pay taxes, they work hard, and they raise their families with honesty. And they become members, valuable members of this society. This is the right attitude that we should have now. And we should reach out other communities, because now it's our turn. But if they set a precedent with Albania, it will be very easy for them to do the same with other communities. And we know from history that if this happened before with other communities, we are not the first, and of course we will not be the last. So now the momentum is for us to come together and to reach out other communities and to try to disrupt this negative narrative. No, we are not criminals. No, if we are given a chance, if we are not going to wait for 6 years, sometimes even more, for a decision for our asylum cases. I'm sure that all the young people that come in here, they want to succeed, to go to universities, to have a job, to have a career in here. These are the real Albanians. Do we have criminals? Of course we have, like all the other countries and communities. But no, we cannot accept that we are Albanians. Sorry if I became a bit too emotional, but I'm really struggling with this for months now with young people, and that I don't really want this to happen. No, we don't have to internalize this negative narrative against us. We should find the strength and reach out for help and build power. I see that Piro has a hand, but thank you very much. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for that insight. I know, I think we have time maybe just for one more question. Kristina, are you okay with that? Are you short on time?
No. Not at all. I can stay here all night.
we have just one that first came in from Art, I think it is, just in the chat. I don't know what the hands up, but I can read it out as well. Talking about your expertise in media discourse. They were eager to hear your thoughts into how the British media's approach in amplifying or exploiting the perspectives of Albanian voices residing in the UK, and especially those associated with the British academia, are dehumanised Albanian migrants genuinely afforded a representative voice within the British media? That's that question.
Oh, thank you. It's a really good question. Yeah, where to start with? Of course, there are some certain voices that have been more amplified than others. For instance, I would love to hear more about the work that Shpresa does. I would like to hear more people like Lady talking about the community, as she just did right now. But unfortunately, sometimes there are Albanian figures, especially in the British academia, as you mentioned, that gain also a lot of capital by, conducting research on Albanian immigration waves. And it's a bit sad that, the same rhetoric, the one that we as Albanian community are trying to fight and counteract on, is sometimes embraced by some Albanian scholars. And also there have been some other cases when there have been Albanian scholars or people with expertise on Albanian migration, and like the discussion hasn't been that much focused on a structural analysis of also holding accountable the government of Albania, for instance. Like at the beginning, I was really happy to hear some scholars that were counteracting on the racializations of Albanians in the UK, but on the other hand, you also have to see the whole thing as transnational, because also the government of Rama is responsible for this, like for not providing better living conditions for Albanian citizens. And maybe also to link this with another question from Bukuria about what can the government, or what is the government doing in regards to the whole discussion on Albanian immigrants. Well, I think that despite all this, let's say, political speeches that Edi Rama has said regarding like how sad he is and how disappointed he is about the way that Albanians have been scapegoated in the UK. Well, at the end, he was the one that signed the agreement with the British government to make all these conditions for Albanian asylum seekers much harder. For instance, the new changes, as I mentioned in the presentation, about the CPIN note that will take away the right to appeal, that is directly a consequence of what Edi Rama, like the government of Albania basically, did in order to give green light to this contract, to this new bilateral agreement between the two countries, and portraying Albania as a country that has the capacities to reintegrate survivors of human trafficking, which I'm afraid it's not the case. It's really far from the reality that those people will face if they get deported back to Albania. Yeah, that's my point on that. And maybe just very briefly, sorry, I don't want to take any more from anyone's time, but I think we should also see it connected to racial capitalism, like how much businesses, corporations, turn the whole issue of immigration into, turning Albanians or other racialized individuals as commodities, that you just deport them and you just, feed the pockets of all these companies, of all these airlines that are going to deport Albanians or others that get deported back. So maybe we should also see it from this perspective, and definitely the government of Albania also will have a lot of profit from this too.
It's really, really food for thought ending there, Kristina. Thank you so much. And I think we've gone over time, but I think we'll end it here. And thank you so much for everyone's questions. They've been fantastic. I've certainly just not even learned so much, but so much thought from this. So thank you, everybody, and especially Kristina. Absolutely brilliant. That's a brilliant presentation. I don't know if it's okay to say, if anybody wants to get in contact with Kristina, we'll be happy to share your email if you're okay with that, Kristina.
Absolutely, especially Twitter account. I live on Twitter.
I forgot that I didn't even ask you before, so I was going to share that then. But it's been fantastic. Thank you so much, Kristina, and Letty as well for joining in. That's been brilliant. All right, have a brilliant evening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kristina. Thank you also, Letty, for your insight. I don't say sorry for being emotional. I think that's kind of important stuff and emotional stuff to talk about. So really thank you even more about that. And also I'd like to say that a lady has written in the chat. So there's a letter against child detention, and she suggests to sign and share this letter, and I will share it too in the recording. So you will find the recording of this event on our YouTube page, and you will find also the link to the letter. And in that, oh yes, sorry, Letty, of course.
What's happening here?
I'd like to unmute Letty.
Okay. Thank you. Just not even 1 minute. We had a very beautiful action on the 27th, and Petros from Westminster University was there, and more than 40 people from our community joined. It was an action, a beautiful action organized by Citizens UK and other organizations, members organization of Citizens UK, against child detention. One of the horrible things of this illegal immigration bill is that they are trying to reintroduce child detention. So every child under 18 that will come illegally with their families, they will be detained in detention centers. And we are fighting against this because this is against children's rights and against human rights. And that's why I shared that that link for everyone who wants to support us with this, to sign that letter and to send it to their local MP, because we only together we can be powerful. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much again, Kristina and Letty. And I also put in the chat the link for our two next events of the project. I think that you might be interested in our next events also, even though they are not kind of related to, I mean, the first one is kind of related to the so-called white feminism and so on. So you may be interested. So I wish you a really good evening to you all, and thank you again.
Thank you
All right.
very much, girls, for
Bye.
this
Thank
interesting
you.
Albanian.
Bye bye.
Love and solidarity.
Solidarity. Bye.